Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest TM Forum webinar entitled Telco API-driven Digital Marketplace Opportunities. My name is Dean Ramsay. I'm Principal Analyst at TM Forum. I'm your host for today. We've got a great session lined up for you this afternoon and a very knowledgeable guest in the form of Karthik from Torry Integrated Solutions. So before we get into the content, I'll ask Karthik to introduce himself and say a little bit about his role at Torry.
Thank you, Dean. Hi, everyone. My name is Karthik. I head the Center of Excellence at Torry. So Center of Excellence designs products and solution accelerators that support our services business. So we have the products line, we do proof of concepts, we provide solutions, we provide thought leadership, and I speak at a lot of conferences. I've done a lot of webinars in the past. So looking forward to sharing our knowledge with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get going. Today's webinar will be about an hour long, and towards the end we'll introduce some questions from the audience into the conversation, or maybe halfway through if we see them pop up. I've got the Q&A box open to my left here, so if I see a relevant question come along that lines up with what we're talking about at that moment, then maybe we'll introduce that into the question. So please do put the questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat function, and we'll introduce your thoughts and your questions into the conversation. Also, if you've registered for today's webinar, you'll receive a copy of the slides, so there's no need to do screenshotting throughout today. Okay, so digital marketplaces. First of all, let's talk about what that means in the telecoms world. I think there's been a growing realization in the industry that that concepts like innovation and conceiving new business models, lots of the things that we talk about all the time, bringing about the new service forms, it's not something that operators need to do alone, and I think that realization is actually happening now, and in fact, it's going it alone is probably a much worse idea than partnering to develop new ways of commercially interacting with other companies and customers and suppliers in these new ecosystems. So along that line of thought, how do we bring products and services of complementary innovators into the telco world, and how do we partake in some of that strong revenue growth that we often see associated with new tech? The tech boom is going on all around telecoms, but revenues generally in telecoms are quite flat. So the digital marketplace is one way to do that. But the shape and form of those digital marketplaces, it varies from telco to telco. And so the opinion of the industry is of what they should look like is still quite fragmented, I think. Which is what you might expect from a concept in its early days like this. So I think in any marketplace, it's obvious that there needs to be a front-end shopping portal that brings all the available products and services together as a channel to the customer. But there's also a lot of back-end systems in place, like partner self-onboarding, partner management, product catalogs, revenue management for charging and billing for whatever digital assets are bought in the marketplace. But beyond that, there are different opinions on form and function. So those are kind of like the fundamental things that probably all marketplaces have. But the form and the function of the actual undertaking, it varies from operator to operator and instance to instance. So on this first slide, we got the results from a piece of industry research that we did at TM Forum at the end of last year that asked a couple of hundred telco decision makers, staff, what is a telco marketplace? So we can see that there are two options that attracted a lot of responses, and those being the first one, a CSP operated digital self-service portal for buying and bundling services from a single CSP and its ecosystem partners. The CSP owns the customer. So 40% of responses for that. And in a way, we can think about that as that classification as kind of the B2B2X portal. And the other popular answer there with 35% is a digital self-service portal hosted by a neutral third-party marketplace provider, through which multiple CSPs and ecosystem partners can offer connectivity, comms, and related service, apps, device, and content. And in that situation, no single CSP or partner owns the channel to the customer. So, that's essentially kind of a third-party platform business. So I think those two instances, they tally very well with what we're seeing in the market in terms of the current group of telco digital marketplaces. I'll come on to some real world examples of those marketplaces in a minute, but interestingly here in these answers, the hyperscale platform business only had 3.5% of the vote there. So it seems that when we ran this survey, there wasn't much confidence in hyperscalers being the right owner of the ecosystem from a telco perspective anyway. This was a survey of telco people. So I think it's important to realize that these different models of marketplace are not at the exclusion of all others. So, we're seeing different shapes and forms, but perhaps that's a means to an end because of the customer relationship or the ecosystem that those marketplaces exist within. So yeah, there's no current right answer. It's just the opinion of the people that we surveyed in this. But in a world where the CSP owns the marketplace, our research found that there's a very definite set of key drivers for the operator wanting to produce a marketplace ecosystem and for them to own the channel to the customer. So Ellie, could I have the next slide, please? So the primary driver of this research shows that the operating the marketplace keeps us in control of the relationship with the customer. So it seems that owning the customer is still very important to CSPs. I think it was 78% of CSP respondents in the survey said that said that owning the customer was a very significant reason for them to want to invest in developing a marketplace. Most of the other top drivers reinforce that idea of controlling the relationship with customers, which has got obvious commercial thinking behind it. On the flip side of that coin, it's suggested to me by a contact that was working in an SI recently that insisting on owning the customer, telcos might be missing revenue opportunities in unfamiliar markets because of the connectivity specific nature of the marketplace that we would build as a telco. So by being so telco centric there, maybe it's one of the diversification strategies that we're missing out on by spreading out. But this point we'll come back to a little later on. So among these responses, there's lots of revenue related drivers. And I think that reflects the idea that telcos need to first diversify their business models by looking at adjacent lines of business that they already understand. And if we look at the types of software and services that are in that first group of CSP digital marketplaces, we see lots of modular software instances that CSPs use in their own operations. We see lots of examples of content that they may be used to delivering as a connectivity provider, maybe by an OTT service provider. So and also we see APIs in those marketplaces, which of course they're integral to the running of a telco from an IT and from a network point of view. Ellie, could I have the next slide, please? So we've looked at the drivers there, and if we look at the flip side of that, what are the things that operators think that they lack or they urgently need to start creating in their own marketplace? So top of the list there is fully automated end-to-end service lifecycle management and quick onboarding of new ecosystem partners. So, this is like the actual mechanics of running the marketplace. Of course, a marketplace needs to have a fully automated back-end architecture so that customers can self-serve without having to interact with a human and wait for that sales process and manual sales process to happen with someone running it. But also the partners at the back end need to be able to onboard and list their products and services using a portal, which runs through the onboarding checklists in an automated way and brings products and services online immediately, but also making sure that they meet all the requirements of the marketplace and its SLA commitments to its customers, things of that nature. So, this is reflected, I think, in this third answer, an open digital architecture, which of course is something that TM Forum members are working on in collaboration to build industry best practice. So we see quite a lot of that things going on around the ODA, the Open Digital Architecture, and the TM Forum Open Digital Framework. And I do think that in those discussions that go on with TM Forum, it is mentioned quite a lot of the time that marketplaces do have a motivating factor in some of that standardization. So a lot of these other answers relate to the revenue management role of the marketplace. How do we do partner settlements? How do we do rating and charging and billing? Things like partnership management. And so these are all familiar things, I think, to anyone who's worked in OSS, BSS, and naturally we're seeing some of the telecoms software vendors who've got a broad portfolio. They're putting together solution sets from their existing systems. If they have a modernized OSS, BSS portfolio developed around microservice architectures and designed with providing digital services in mind, there's obviously a very easy play for them there to help their existing operator customers to build backends for marketplaces. So over on the left of this slide, there's a few examples of the existing operator digital marketplaces that are out there at the moment of various types. So I'd just like to pull out a couple of examples. In the top left there, AT&T obviously were early to the party, and would be an example of would be an example that many of the audience already know about. They have an IoT marketplace, which offers not just IoT solutions like full IoT solutions, but components like connectivity and connectivity management, hardware, devices, various platforms and services. They also offer kind of the SDK developer kits and have the API marketplace, which offers pre-packaged code to embed into websites and applications. So, they sell a lot of kind of turnkey stuff, but lots of applications and self-service APIs for developers to create custom applications themselves. So, they've got a broad group of technology partners that they're working with there. It's a good example of that kind of traditional telco owning the relationship with the customer and using their scale and having some success in that area. And having success in an area like APIs, where you wouldn't necessarily think of them as the go-to supplier or shop for APIs. Another example here is Telefonica Tech. That's an interesting offering. They have a IoT global cloud platform that provides focuses on delivering connectivity for vertical applications, really, in the IoT world. So smart cities, smart meters, vending machines, sensor-based devices, those sort of things. And I think they have a couple of hundred partners globally, and they're slowly building this marketplace based on the growth markets that they see around the IoT sector. So lots of the research we've done suggested that IoT does have high single-digit year-on-year growth in some service lines. So it's a lot higher than traditional telco services. It's attractive to a company like Telefonica Tech to build an ecosystem around that. So they're providing components around infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, things like that. I'll just pick another one out of this list, which is MTN's Chenosis, which is an API marketplace. And I think it's mostly aimed at the African continent, but it's a cross-industry API marketplace for developers and entrepreneurs and businesses. So, within that, they can acquire from or sell to quite a large library of open APIs. Now, it seems that model is perhaps really interesting for telecoms companies and maybe for telcos who are at the moment thinking about coming into the marketplace concept, coming to market with something of their own. If they want to make more connections with a much wider network of developers and businesses beyond those which they already do business with. I think that's an interesting model, and it's slightly divergent away from what we'd expect in the first wave of those marketplaces. So can I go into my my last slide, please, Ellie? So the importance of APIs in digital ecosystem management. Now, what this diagram shows is that in all of the vertical solutions that a CSP might be able to produce, there's obviously a very complex series of components and capabilities underneath the hood, which relate to devices and radio connectivity, physical fixed access networks, content, apps, cloud services, all those sort of things. And also, the thousands of IT systems, OSS, BSS, network management, orchestration, all of those things. So the key aspect when thinking about all these components in isolation is interoperability. When designing and building a service, the ability of these components to work together in a pre-approved automated way is fairly critical. So in terms of the concept of marketplaces, we're seeing a lot of focus being placed on microservice architectures, modular systems, common standards, and developing models which are in adherence to open APIs. Obviously here at TM Forum, we see a lot of that going on, and there's an awful lot of collaboration work around the open APIs. There's a series of chat boards that you can see where the developers are just constantly working on specific use cases and how they use the APIs there, and a lot of the times these are all kind of marketplace related. So I'm going to stop presenting now, and we'll get the perspective of our guests today. So Karthik, let me ask you some questions, if I may. I see there's some coming in from the audience. We'll get around to those in a minute, but tell us about Torry Harris and how you're currently helping telcos like BT and O2 and others become digital life partners.
Sure. So Torry Harris Integration Solutions is an IT services provider. We have the services division and we have the products division. So from a services point of view, we provide the integration services required for telcos to transform their IT estate to support API-driven digital marketplaces and digital ecosystem business models. So how do we do that for customers like BT, O2, and a couple of other telcos? So basically, we provide what we call the factory model. It's actually called the farm and factory model. So the farm and factory model is a model where we engage with the product managers, with the business teams to map the customer journeys in terms of how monetization can be driven through the assets of telcos, right? And this then gets translated into API candidates, and these API candidates are delivered through a factory model. So this is done through a series of steps, mapping to a third-party cloud SaaS service, transforming a couple of legacy components, building microservices, deploying some flows on iPaaS. So the world is moving towards a hybrid integration model, right? So what we do with the telcos in Europe and in South America, basically a hybrid model using a combination of on-premise BSS systems and using cloud-based components and connecting all the pieces together.
So I guess that integration work is something that's, it's on the face of things, it seems like it should be extremely complicated, and I guess you've got teams of people that are very specifically capable of doing all the little pieces of that. But I thought it's quite interesting what you were talking about translating to APIs there. Is this something that is like increasingly you're seeing more demand for in the industry?
That's correct. So integration is the core for any digital transformation, and APIs are one of the key means of doing that. To illustrate what I'm telling, let me show you a couple of slides. I hope I have control.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so to answer your question, the way we look at it is So today the world is all moving towards API-driven opportunities, and monetization is the key, right? So if you look at how telcos have evolved, I would like to start with sharing a story of what we did in BT. So this is where we automated the onboarding process, and this aligns to the survey that you just showed in your presentation, Dean. So customer onboarding was the top second priority, and all the challenges in making sure that you reduce the time, and we were able to reduce the time from 6 weeks to 2 days. And how did we do that? We templatized a lot of processes and eliminated manual steps. So the idea is looking at the areas where you can provision upfront. So there are some elements in your onboarding customer journey where you can plan in advance, you can create automation solutions in advance, you can provide adapters to your partners, and make sure that you only do the essential stuff that's required to onboard. So you bring in an element of self-service and anticipate the complex steps and eliminate redundancy in onboarding new partners. So you templatize the process so that you do it once, and for all future partners, they'll be able to use the template and very quickly onboard. So this is a case study that's published in TM Forum. It's public, it's there in TM Forum website. So I'd request you to take a look. And to go ahead and answer specific points in terms of how we see integration as the key driver. So if you see the evolution of telcos, we all know that telcos evolved from being just a communication service provider to being a digital service provider. And APIs are the key means of doing that. So today, most telcos are in the process of exposing APIs, either for internal use, because APIs are ubiquitous. But the real point is, how do you leverage these APIs to drive monetization to your core capabilities? And this is where telcos are transforming into being a digital services provider. And 5G has a very key role to play. So gone are the days where consumers just look at engaging with the telco for watching videos, right? Like, so today you can do that with 4G as well. No, the real monetization opportunity for 5G is in the enterprise segment. It's in the B2B segment. So which is where the ecosystems and marketplaces come into picture, right? So you're looking at building an ecosystem in adjacent industry verticals, in terms of like any industry vertical that has telco-like capabilities or that needs telco-like capabilities, right? So if you take any digital business today that requires messaging services, any digital business requires order management. Okay, any digital business today requires some kind of a security as a service, right? And telcos do this for a living. It's part of the telco's core capabilities to do it for telco's core operation. Now, all telcos need to do is transform their core capabilities, which I'll talk about subsequently as well. It talks about how you transform your capabilities so that you become a digital service provider and offer solutions in adjacent industry verticals. And when you offer this as a service, you can look at expanding your partner network in that industry vertical. So this is how APIs fit, and integration plays a key role in transforming what you have to what you can provide and monetize.
I think that's really interesting. You know, there's that concept of taking something that telcos know how to do very well and already have the IT assets for and have all of the experience with, and then, you know, presenting that in kind of the platform model to an enterprise ecosystem and other players. You know, it's something that I think has been around for a while as an idea, but it hasn't really come to fruition. Is this something that you think is kind of happening really quickly now, or what's the kind of timescale we're looking at for this development? You know, you see it in a few progressive operators, but not all the way across the industry. What do you think the kind of timescales we're looking at for pickup is?
I think, the concept of ecosystems and marketplaces is not new, and this is definitely not something which is like futuristic. It's actually happening here and now. It's just like how for a customer segment, a telco provides a cell phone to consume their core capabilities. This is seen as the bare minimum capabilities that telcos need to provide to their B2B customers. So today, this is happening here and now, and I don't think it's something that out there in the future. To illustrate this with an example, today, if you look at the profiles of typical partners, Every partner today needs capabilities that are telco centric, right? Like if you take small retail outlets, everyone needs everyone is now transforming into a digital provider, and COVID has been a very big driver for forcing enterprises and small businesses to transform from just being a physical provider to a digital provider. And retail outlets don't have the required technical capabilities in terms of either the knowledge or the tools, and most importantly, the connectivity to do it themselves. They will be struggling by themselves, looking for different cloud services in the SaaS marketplace. And telcos have a golden opportunity because they have the relationship with these B2B partners, because every telco has an enterprise business unit. And telcos today have a relationship in terms of offering connectivity services like your landline services, your enterprise mobility services. So they can leverage these relationships and offer value-added services to all these providers that you're seeing here in the screen. Like, and most telcos, as we have seen in Dean's slide, IoT marketplace is very common. It's happening as we speak now. And it's just a matter of time you extend this to adjacent use cases for the other players as well. Mm-hmm. And what we call the networks effect is made possible by partnering with providers like your banks, energy utilities, insurance providers, to enrich the value of the offerings of your partner ecosystem. And all of them are connected through the core telco offerings. And what this happens, this creates what we call the network effect, which geometrically increases the value of transactions that go through the platform. And how this is made possible? This is made possible by transforming your core telco capabilities like billing as a service, product catalog as a service. So the tangible action that telcos can do is they already have billing systems, they already have product catalog, they already have order management. All you need to do is think in terms of integration, think in terms of API enablement, and think in terms of making everything as a service. So if you transform your legacy systems and by leveraging the integration capabilities and transform it into a service model, we can easily monetize and offer it to your partner ecosystem. And this, I believe, is a low-hanging fruit. This can be done right here, right now. It's not in future.
Yeah. So you're saying that. Well, I understand the piece about this is kind of like driving the CSP to DSP change. As a digital service provider, these are the capabilities that an operator should have. But do you also think that it's kind of the other macro trend that goes with that usually is talking about operators diversifying their business models, and it's one of those things that I think if you'd have talked about that 5 or 10 years ago, people would have thought that you'd had to just start from scratch, from a blank whiteboard and say, right, what new service model will we develop? And I think what we're talking about here is something more fundamental, a more fundamental change, that if you build an architecture and you build a kind of marketplace around that as a platform, that you can offer things as a service, and under the action of doing that, naturally you diversify the business and the amount of companies that you can serve. Do you think that that's true? That's what's happening?
I completely agree. I mean, diversification is completely unavoidable, and it's a huge opportunity. I mean, to illustrate the opportunity, if you look at industry verticals, today there are many examples where telcos worldwide are offering ecosystems in specific industry verticals. And today the business teams of telcos look at different industry segments and look at how to combine the connectivity services and bring in a partner ecosystem. And a classic example is healthcare. I've seen many examples where telcos use fleet management, digital healthcare, building management, IoT use cases, smart cities, so many examples, right? And to extend this example, the next level of maturity is to look at telco as an ecosystem enabler, which means they don't only need to become adjacent industry provider themselves, but they can target startups, or they can target medium-sized providers in the respective domain and say, hey, why don't we help you to transform yourself into an energy ecosystem, right? So that's a huge opportunity for telcos. So it can be a B2B business where they offer the whole ecosystem enablement in a box. So telcos, as I said, have all the required capabilities provided in a cloud model, enabled as a service model, and all these examples that I've shown here can pretty much take advantage of it. And to take it even further, telcos can offer system integration services, right? So that way, it's not only about providing the APIs, but it's also API enabling your partners. Because that way you can have a deeper integration with your partner systems. Like you can make the inventory of these providers accessible in your marketplace, right? And that's what we call the value orchestration. So that way the end customer gets more value rather than just looking at marketplace like a dummy yellow pages kind of a portal, right? So these are the opportunities that telcos have.
Absolutely, I agree with that. It seems that the system integration piece is for the next 10 years is going to be really interesting, and you know, for lots of the SIs that I talk to, or the integration teams within operators, you know, it seems that because of this ecosystem and the widening possibilities, is that the next 10 years is going to be really interesting in terms of piecing this all together. Let's take a question from the audience. There's some coming in now. This is from Erin Paran. Are these marketplaces just a portal and a shopping cart, or does the marketplace include full certified integration of the partners into the network? Okay, so that's interesting. A question about the partners. You know, how does this work from a relationship point of view?
That's a very good question. And this slide exactly answers that point. And to answer your question in the next level of detail, the short answer to your question is marketplace should definitely be much more than a portal where consumers and publishers publish their offering, right? And what is that something more, right? Like I can illustrate this with a very specific example. So this is an example from our Digit Market, it's just marketplace product built by Torry Harris. So this has the usual storefront, the administrator, vendor management, and all that stuff that you expect in any marketplaces. But what's more important is the question that you asked. So what's the value that partners can, what value that telcos can provide to partners to have a deeper integration? It's basically enabling the partner systems. And specific examples are product catalog, inventory, order capture. And you need to provide the tools like a micro gateway and an integration tool. And as Dane rightly said, and as we have been saying throughout, integration plays a key role in increasing the value of transactions, right? So imagine a scenario where a customer is looking at the partner's offerings. It makes more sense for the end user to know if this product exists or not with the supplier. And how can you do this? By only integrating in live with the inventory management system of your partner. And when you submit the order, how will the partner know that an order has been submitted? Only by integrating with the order capture system or the order management system, right? And how do you know if the stocks are there and if the product has got an update? Only by integrating with the product catalog, right? And we provide tools like coupler and micro gateways under the Digit Market umbrella to actually make this happen.
What was interesting that while you were talking about that description of what needs to happen there, I was thinking about telco operations and how similar this is. But you know, this is kind of like a greenfield IT instance. So do you think that telcos can learn a lot from how to put together all the backend systems for a marketplace and how that could relate to the way that they do the kind of like orchestrated order management and things like that in their own operations?
Sure. I don't think it's greenfield. Telcos can leverage with what they have, and this slide exactly shows you that. So the first step you need to do is you look at it from the bottom up, right? So core telco capabilities, everyone knows the core BSS, OSS, billing, order management, product catalog, mobile identity, digital wallet, pricing, quotation, all that stuff, right? And here you look at your network layer, like you have your core network, your 5G, your edge services, your SMS, MMS, all your SDP platforms as it's called. And then you also look at the infrastructure in terms of the IT hosting. And then you look at combining your providers and consumers, and this is where the marketplace fits in. So what you need to do as a telco is to look at service enabling all of your the core backbone, and in many cases, I mean, in cases where telcos already are advanced, or any telco that's, for example, if today you launch a telco, today you have a lot of options. Today you get all these blocks that you're seeing in the screen on the cloud, so you don't have to do it. But it's not easy for telcos to just switch off your BSS and just switch on a cloud basis, right? Like you need to kind of transform your existing BSS to make it enabled as a service. And this is where the microservices comes into picture, where you can build a layer on top to kind of API enable. You need to think in terms of introducing multi-tenancy. so that your billing is not only used for your customers, but you are able to create a tenant for your enterprise customers. You are able to provision them. You need to containerize them so that you are able to take the traffic that this ecosystem will demand. Products like Docker, Kubernetes comes into picture, so that all these blocks that you see in the screen can be scaled up and scaled down on demand to support your ecosystems. And this is completely within the telcos remit to do that. Telcos are already doing this day in and day out to support their existing B2C business. So all you need to do is just the tweak to bring in this line of thinking to make everything cloud enabled and as a service enabled.
Great. So while we're talking about components there, let's take another question from the audience. This is from Alex Hawker. How do you square away real-time partner compensation with the reality of returns and refunds management? So, I guess like a revenue management question. It's quite seems like a complex set of micropayments and things that are not that you couldn't do with a legacy revenue management system that a telco might have. So this all kinds of seems like a very modern IT concept. Is that what you're seeing?
I mean, it can be looked at from two perspectives. It all depends on the capabilities of your existing payment platform. Typically the telcos address this is you partner with a third-party payment gateway, a third-party digital micropayments provider that offer micropayments provider as a service. So this is where your partner ecosystem comes into picture. I mean, to offer a digital ecosystem, you can look at strategic partnerships who can provide the capabilities as building blocks, right? So if you go back to my previous slide, sorry, I think if you go back to the previous slide, it talks about the different building blocks. So that one of the building blocks shows, one of the building blocks shows your digital wallet as a service. And if you think that your digital wallet capability is not mature, you can look at it in terms of plugging a SaaS-based digital wallet to fulfill the customer journeys, to do the micropayments, to do all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And SaaS there, do you think that that's going to play a big role in this? Because I was speaking to quite a large OSS BSS vendor the other day about SaaS, and they're just kind of getting going with SaaS. They're just starting to offer components as in a SaaS option, but it's something they've been talking about for 10 years really. And so I think at the moment is the time. They think it's where they're starting to move a lot of their capabilities to a SaaS delivery option. Do you think that possibly that's driven by this need to be able to present components separately in a marketplace?
Absolutely. I mean, today, most enterprises, not just telcos, are big on what is called the composable architecture. So composable architecture is where your different components of your IT is provisioned from different sources. It could be a combination of legacy. It could be a combination of on-prem products. It could be a combination of SaaS. So today, the idea is to make your integration work together seamlessly across components within your enterprise and on the cloud. So that's exactly why integration has even more importance, to make sure that your customer journey flow is seamless across the network boundaries, on-prem, legacy, SaaS, and frameworks like iPaaS becomes very much important. Containerization becomes very much important for dynamic scaling up and scaling down. And today we are in the age of cloud native, right? Cloud native is being discussed big time, and telcos are already doing it as we speak. And we are doing this for different telcos in the Europe that we are working with, to make sure that you make sure that all the components that you build are cloud native ready, either on telco's own cloud or procuring a SaaS-based offering from third parties. So that's how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree about the cloud native. I mean, we've personally been putting together a list recently of, what are the most common characteristics in a modernized IT procurement cycle, for a telco when they're looking at sending out RFPs or RFI RFPs to the vendors, and cloud native is like top of the list. it's a big list of requirements, but cloud native is top of the list at the moment. So I'm interested in this. I was talking earlier about this, operators want to be kind of like the sole owner of this marketplace, but there's also different models where they aren't. There might be a third party or a hyperscaler even, and so is the operators wanting to own the marketplaces? Do you think that's a really positive thing, or do you think it's problematic for the market? Would a handful of centralized marketplaces make more sense rather than hundreds of operator-owned marketplaces?
I think the idea is to look at it from an industry vertical standpoint. I mean, to show you specific examples. So these are all real examples that telcos are doing it. So if you look at Industry 4.0 marketplace, it makes more sense for telcos to offer this rather than a central marketplace. Because all the central marketplaces, if you are talking about players like Amazon and others, they're a general purpose marketplaces, right? And today, when you think of B2B, it makes more sense to offer focused ecosystem so that the value exchange is much more meaningful for all the parties involved. So if you are thinking in terms of a general marketplace, you will just be like 1 out of million providers. Okay, and it's a huge opportunity for telcos to look at specialized marketplaces like these, so that they can create tailor-made offerings and provide value-added services both for the participants in terms of the partner networks and also for the consumers.
Mm-hmm. And presumably specialized tech will support each one of these use cases.
Yeah. Other example is smart city, right? Smart city, these are very specific use cases in a smart city, right? So these are the typical provider networks, and the yellow band shows the telco capabilities, what system integration as a service offerings can be weaved into the value system or the systems of these networks. So that when the end consumer uses the offerings, it's tightly integrated. It's much more seamless. So customers will want to use a telco offering rather than a general purpose offering, because general purpose offering tends to become more like the Yellow Pages example that I talked about. And the real value is in providing specialized marketplaces like this.
Yeah.
I also have an example on smart buildings, but I'll not go into details. I mean, smart buildings is also an example where it's a subset of smart cities, but these are very specific examples that telco core capabilities can be combined with the partner components so that the end customer gets maximum value.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that's a really interesting use case, and it's another one of these examples of things that as a concept has been around for a while, but in terms of like the revenue that operators have been able to derive from that idea hasn't been a huge thing for them, and so as I was talking about in my intro, that there's IoT based marketplaces have got some really interesting specific bundles and ways of approaching things like smart buildings. So I can see from your slide that there's an awful lot of things going on here to provide varieties of different solutions into smart buildings. What can you talk us through this?
Yeah, I mean, this is real. I mean, our own organization had a real problem statement. I mean, a classic use case is a fire alarm integration. So usually when you buy an office property space, usually they provide built-in sensors, right? So they build a smart building management system provided by any building management vendor will only design systems that work with their products. But the real problem is we interviewed facility managers and said, what's the problem with this building? They say that when they build buildings, the access control system is from a different system, CCTV cameras from a different vendor, and the real need is interoperability. And unless someone takes ownership and thinks in terms of how to offer interoperability to this community segment, there's going to be frustration. And that's a huge opportunity that telcos can capitalize based on a real need that we have researched and published. So whatever you are seeing here is a result of interviews with facility managers, building owners, device providers, energy auditors, these kind of profiles, right? So
yeah. And there's lots, I guess the devices there that you mentioned, that there are so many different types and so many different manufacturers that, having accreditation or standardization or, I'm thinking about security as well. All of those concerns are compounded by the fact that there's just a huge variety of devices in a possible smart building scenario for IoT.
Exactly. So that's the reason why integration, telcos can offer integration as a service through partnership with what we call the electrical integrators. In fact, there are profiles of small businesses that call themselves electrical integrators, and they only do this for a living. They make sure that they establish interoperability between different devices, but they need empowerment. They need to get the adapters from the device manufacturers. So only when telcos or any large enterprise offers an ecosystem of different adapters, this cannot be made possible. And that's a huge opportunity that's already being capitalized by energy management giants. Right. So it's a huge opportunity for telcos to learn from how energy management companies do that.
Right. Yeah. And I suppose this all plays into the idea of onboarding into a catalog of a marketplace if
Exactly
accredited, and then so everything that is automatically onboarded into the catalog is already checked out, and the marketplace owner knows that they're selling something that's not a liability for their customers.
That's true.
Let's take another question from the audience. There's one here that's quite off at a tangent, but I think it's an interesting question. How will telcos manage their talent and skills pool to support and maintain different technology and software stacks required to support diverse systems integration requirements in larger enterprise accounts? So talking about the people that support all of this.
That's a very good question. I mean, every telco today, I mean, in terms of the skills required, the whole integration layer is becoming hybrid, right? And telcos need to, I mean, they can't obviously let go of their systems, right? And how the integration landscape has transformed in terms of these skill sets. I mean, just to show you, yeah, so this is how we see the skill sets that are required, and this is why you need to pick and choose the integration providers who do this for a living, organizations like ourselves, where integration is in our middle name, as we call it. So we provide these offerings in terms of end-to-end services that transform your legacy integration components into the building blocks that are required for supporting a digital ecosystem. So everything you see on the right side are cloud-centric, API-centric, digital-friendly. Everything that takes into consideration automatic scaling, dynamic infrastructure, elastic compute, and modern frameworks, event-driven frameworks, IoT-centric components. So telcos obviously need to have those skills. You can augment those skills with providers like ours, and use this as you can use this as a reference. And of course, you'll have access to these slides, and you can use this as a reference to sketch out your skill acquisition journey.
Great, that's a good answer. I'm just looking. There's an awful lot of questions coming in from the audience. We've got quite a lot of people on today. Let's go for a risky question. In your view, what are the top reasons that telco marketplaces have failed?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think telco marketplaces have failed because it was seen only as a technical initiative, and the path to monetization was not made clear from the outset. Right? So today opportunities exist. It's just that you have to look at a marketplace as a business offering, right? And it has to be driven by the business and supported by the IT. And today we have seen many instances in telcos where IT have been given the role of thinking like business stakeholders, which means the value proposition needs to be identified, the customer problem statement needs to be identified, and you need to think in terms of communities, right? Like today, a community of users that have common needs are very good candidates for identifying pain areas and opportunities. Classic example is like how the interview that we did with the facility managers for the smart building ecosystem. Okay? So if you don't do this interview upfront with the users and think in terms of a digital marketplace and just put components, you are going to kind of build offerings that no one needs. You'll build APIs that no one uses, right? So you need to think of monetization and revenue right from the outset. So that kind of outside in thinking is very important for all stakeholders. Business, it's mandatory, and IT, it's even more important to make sure that you're able to demonstrate value of the IT investments that you are seeking to build.
Yeah. Okay. So continuing with that, when Torry Harris engaged with an operator doing this sort of thing, what are the KPIs that you set, in that project? What does the project look like from the start?
Sure. So obviously, the KPIs. I mean, to show you a very specific example. So the KPI needs to be monetization driven, right? And how that can be made is you always connect the customer journey right from the user's perspective to your IT capabilities that need to be monetized, and we make sure that we bring the business teams and the IT teams together. We conduct workshops. We have three roles called the beneficiaries, enablers, and catalysts. So beneficiaries are those who commit to monetizing the offering that the IT provides, and we as the integration catalysts make sure that your IT roadmap is driven by your business need. And our KPI is completely driven based on how well a telco monetizes their digital ecosystem. And any changes or any IT component that you build, I see one question that's related to service mesh, right? So you can't have a service mesh just because it's one of the coolest thing in the cloud native landscape, right? You need to ask yourself, okay, how does a piece of technology map to a particular customer pain area or a kind of a revenue opportunity? How does it empower a salesperson? How can a customer reduce the number of steps in closing the transaction? So this kind of revenue-based thinking is what we need to engineer. And this is what we set as KPIs for telcos and also for ourselves in terms of how we make this happen through IT enablement. And we do that through a series of tools and accelerators. To show you an example, so obviously the IT capability needs to be enriched, and you need to go to market quickly, and that can be made possible through a set of tools and solution accelerators. To give you a specific example, so we provide a full set of lifecycle tools that is illustrated in this slide, which has a range of tools from your enterprise repository to review automation to deployment automation, API exposure, our own digital marketplace framework, our IoT integration framework, sandbox automation, deployment automation. So we have the full stack. Right? So the question is how the KPIs are designed in terms of how these tools are put to use so that it connects to the bigger purpose, which is how it enables revenue, how it solves a customer pain area.
Yeah, that's great. I like the term integration catalysts. It suggests that everything tech-wise is kind of there already. You just need the know-how to make all the connections and make these things work together. Let's take I'm aware that we're coming to the end of the session, but let's take a couple more questions from the audience. How will the front-end digital marketplace integration take place with these back-end building blocks? Because at the end of the day, telcos will offer these marketplaces to its user base.
Right. I mean, okay. The way of looking at it is today, every product is designed based on an API-first approach, and our product digit market is also based on that. So there is a concept called the headless architecture. So all the marketplace components, if you have a product that supports the headless architecture, that's great. If not, you need to think in terms of how you build your core marketplace capabilities as APIs, having the API first development mindset. So once you have these APIs and build everything as a service, if I have to go back to this particular slide and show you an example, yeah, this is the one. Yeah. So all these building blocks that you see here are API enabled, and then your front end sits here. So this is where the customer facing portal sits here. So this becomes a kind of a lightweight user interface that just consumes these APIs. So that way you are making it channel agnostic. So this front end could be your mobile app, it could be a kiosk, it could be an IoT device, or it could be a marketplace portal, right? So this kind of modular thinking and API first strategy is very important to make this possible.
Great. That lines up exactly with the title of our webinar today, the finding value in this. This is one of the kind of key things, I think. So one of the kind of final questions I always ask in these webinars is what's the most significant learning that you've had of the last 5 years of your career with working with this concept? What's the most interesting thing about all of this, the single most thing that you could tell our audience about?
Yes. The most important thing is you can't throw away legacy. I mean, legacy is there. I mean, generally there is a tendency for or any large enterprise, not just telcos, to just buy a shiny new kind of product and expect that the product magically will solve all your problems, right? So the real value that you bring to the table is how you differentiate your customer journey to the end user. And that responsibility you have to take ownership of. And how can you do that? Only by integration, which means you need to first think, as I said, in an outside-in approach, map out your value proposition, map out your customer journeys, and then look at what capabilities that you need to kind of map it to your IT systems. It could be mapping to an existing BSS stacks. It could be a requirement to build new microservices, or it could be a combination of all the three, right? And that's how we have shown this in the form of 3 progressive levels. So that way you don't have to kind of spend years doing a kind of a transformations programs by replacing your kind of legacy basis stack. So you can do it in a much more pragmatic way if you have an integration mindset. So think of what needs to be kept, what needs to be decommissioned, what can be enriched. And that's where you have this concept of re-hosting, re-platforming, and remodeling, re-architecting, right? So that's the principle of cloud native. So what components can be progressively cloud native enabled, and how you can use the API gateway to support your new business models and your channels.
Exactly. It's transformation, right? It's not replacement.
Exactly.
It's finding the path, finding the right path. Well, that's great. I think we've had a really good discussion today, Karthik, and I think we've had quite a lot of questions from the audience. Really sorry if we didn't get around to answering those. But I think if Ellie could put up the last slide, both our email addresses are on the slide. We'd both be very happy to hear from you in follow-up to today's session. If you were registered beforehand, you can you'll get the recording link sent to you after today's session, so you can share that out with your colleagues. And so yeah, that's where we're going to wrap it up for today. So Karthik, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Dean.